Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming your way for something that's not too common for this channel. I'm going to be reviewing a relatively recent movie that came out. It came out last year, I guess, 2025, and actually it must have been last year when we were at the theater to see something else. I saw a poster for this, and I thought it was a different actress. I thought it was that one other actress. I don't know what the hell her name is, but the poster of this is just like, oh God, give me a break. And I looked at the poster and I commented to Beth like, oh, what a bunch of garbage, without knowing anything about it. Cut to months later, I was able to see this online, and I've just watched it, I think, for the third time last night. And I gotta tell you, man, 2025, there was at least a couple of decent movies, or very decent movies that came out. Stopping on by to review the movie by the name of, which I don't know how to pronounce. Is it Bugonia? That's how I pronounce it. Bugonia. Bugonia. That's how I pronounce it. Whether it's pronounced that way, that's how I'm going to pronounce it. Bugonia. Not Bugonia, just simply Bugonia. That's how I've always been pronouncing it since I started watching this movie. So what can I tell you? I don't know if this is just a trend of what's been happening for decades, and because I haven't been seeing a lot of movies, admittedly, the reason I'm seeing a little more movies is because I've got my feet, my toes dipped more into streaming than I used to have. So maybe there were always a handful of decent movies that came out every year. I was just under the impression that there wasn't. Maybe there wasn't. I don't know. But I haven't been watching a lot of new movies the past, what would you say, past, I guess 20 years really. I mean 10, 15, 20 years. I haven't been watching a lot of the new movies that have been coming out over the years, just because for the most part, like, the mainstream stuff is garbage. But I gotta tell you, this movie is really up my alley, and I don't think I'm not aware of the director. I don't know if I've seen anything else the director has done, but I really responded to the visual style. Might be a little, when you have such a visual style, like, what's his name? Is it Wes Anderson or whatever his name is? Like, sometimes, like, too much of a visual style. Like, I'm not a big fan of, like, the really shallow depth of field in some shots and stuff. Like, oh, you've got an inch to work with, actor or actress. So it's like, I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. But I've always liked, ever since I was a kid, and maybe even going back to seeing, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey in the 80s and stuff, even though that would have been pan and scan, I was still aware of, like, some of them really wide-angle lenses, wide-angle shots and stuff, like, and ever since I was a kid, I've always just loved wide-angle lenses and stuff, and this movie is I'd say, more or less, and another thing I really loved, this probably goes back to 2001 as well, I really responded to, like, not only wide-angle lenses, but, like, static shots, which is just a stationary, non-moving shot. To me, like, just the language of this movie really speaks to me, and it's my film language, if you will. It's the kind of language that I do when I do my short films, and when I did my feature film, no budget feature film that I did. It's my kind of film language. Maybe some of I don't know if this would have been made to see on IMAX, but maybe some of the shots, if you look on a smaller TV, are a little kind of far away with the wide lens, but it's the director's prerogative. He can do what he wants or whatever. But first off the bat, let me just say, like, visually, I really like this movie. And actually, because I got my mom, I showed my mom this movie yesterday, and because my mom in 2010, I outfitted her living room with 5.1, and since, I got my receiver, 5.1 receiver, I got one in my first 5.1 receiver in 98, then I got one for my dad's living room in 2001. That's the one that we got in 2001, still what I use in my living room, which of course does not have HDMI, but because of the one I got my mom for her living room in 2010, well, I think she bought it, but I picked it out, that's got HDMI input. I just recently started streaming movies at her place in 5.1 by putting the little streamer stick into the back of the 5.1 receiver, and then outputting the HDMI to the TV. So it's just like, wow, just recently, that's the second movie that that we streamed in 5.1, and the sound design on this movie is really great. Technically, this is like really well done in my opinion, and it's so strange. It's one of at least 2 movies that came out last year that were purported to have been filmed with VistaVision cameras. I'm not going to go into VistaVision. This review will be 2.5 hours long, but that's all I'll say is this movie and of course the Paul Thomas Anderson film One Battle After Another from last year were both purported to have been shot with VistaVision cameras, and it's like I hadn't even heard VistaVision since like the 50s or the 60s. Like I didn't. What did they do? Refurbish an old camera from 50-year-old, 60-year-old cameras to, I don't know how that works, but just like another film that I think was relatively good that came out last year, this one also was purported to have been shot with VistaVision cameras, which is really strange. And if you know anything about VistaVision cameras, I mean they're a bigger area of film on the film strip. I think it's taking the same 35mm film, but just switching it sideways, so the same film you can have a bigger image area. It's a bigger, it's more definition. But one thing that's kind of like with the Hateful Eight that I've always thought was strange is you need all this definition to film a movie that takes place indoors in a house in a basement. It's just like, it's kind of weird to me, but whatever. I kind of sometimes I nerd out on those technical aspects, like, ooh, this was shot with VistaVision cameras, and the aspect ratio when you watch it on at home is really wonky and goofy. I don't know why. Like there seems to be like there's black bars on the sides, but there seems to be a little bit of black barrage on the top, which makes no sense to me. Why not just zoom in on it so close enough where there's no black bars on the top, and then there'd be even less black bars on the side? It makes no sense, because when you look at In a Violent Nature on a 16:9 TV, it's top to bottom image, but of course you got black bars on the sides or whatever. So the fact that they've got, it's almost like window boxed this movie is strange to me. But anyway, this review is going to be really weird, because I've always been one, like if I'm going to show Beth a movie on streaming or something and I go to pick it and there's a little synopsis, I'm like, don't read that. It's like just, a lot of times when I used to show my dad movies that he hadn't seen, or when I show Beth movies that she hasn't seen, or even Mom yesterday, queuing up Bugonia, don't read that. It's kind of like, a lot of the fun, in my opinion, of just going in not knowing anything which is what I did when I watched this movie. I don't read most oftentimes, and not the little synopsis, because for me and that's going to make reviewing this a little more difficult. For me, that's one of the great things about experiencing and discovering a movie, is to not know anything about it. So I can't even, there's aspects, I'm not going to really comment on much of what this movie's about. I'll just simply say that these guys, I think I can say this small point. I don't even think I'm going to say that. It's about that's another thing I love about this movie, is just, me if you've seen some of my movie reviews and stuff, the kind of movies that really interest me are just like quirky, just goofy, out of the ordinary plot points and characters and dialogue, and kind of dry British humor maybe. And this movie has it in spades. It's like just these 2 goofy guys on a mission to do, and I'm not even going to spoil what they're on a mission to do. It involves the Emma Stone actress, and I'm not even going to say what she is, and you probably know maybe what the movie's about. But for me, like discovering this movie, not knowing anything about it, and discovering it without knowing anything about it, is one of the things that was so enjoyable. So I'm not even gonna, I'll say what it's about. I'll just simply say that it's about these 2 goofy guys, and what happens with them in relation to the Emma Stone character. And yes, her head ends up being shaved, and flashbacks to the 1992, the spring of '92, and Alien 3 was big in the theater. I remember, you can imagine '92, like how much of a really kind of a bold, hardcore move that was, to shave Sigourney Weaver's head for that movie. Pretty insane. But this is going to be a strange review, because I pretty much, I don't want to, like, if you don't know anything about this movie, and if you want to go see it or whatever, or go see it, into wherever the TV is and watch it, I don't want to ruin any of it. I don't want to, so it's kind of strange. I guess I'll just, I'm not going to comment on the movie itself. On the plot points or whatever. I'll just simply say that Third time watching it last night, first time with 5.1, and my God, the sound design, oh, you know, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not Armageddon or, you know, or whatever movie. Top Gun, I remember that was a big staple Laserdisc kind of audio showcase, home theater showcasing movie back in the 90s. You know, Top Gun Laserdisc. Seemed like every 5 years they put out a new Laserdisc of Top Gun, and then of course the one that was like the first AC3 or Dolby Digital Laserdisc of Top Gun was this like showcase home theater seller kind of thing. I never had Dolby Digital AC3 on Laserdisc. That wouldn't happen until I got DVDs and stuff. But yeah, it's a strange review, admittedly, because I'm not going to comment too much on the movie itself. I will just simply say I love the scenario, and the performances are really great. One thing I can comment on without ruining too much about what the movie's about and stuff is you've got these two main characters, these two guys, and of course the one guy is kind of the main guy who's this big plan, and then the other guy is like the hanger-on or the hanger-oner or the help. And obviously the hanger-on or help guy is a little, we'll just say, not so much there, if you know what I mean. And I gotta tell you, not only did I find the relationship or the portrayal of these two these two characters, these two male characters, kind of fascinating, and just the characters of them, and just the relationship between them, and perhaps maybe the dominating guy is a little too dominating, you know, maybe he's thinking too much for this, you know, this maybe half-wit guy. And I gotta tell you, the half-wit guy, I don't know if I've ever seen, there was something familiar about that guy. I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything else before, but I gotta tell you, what a performance. I mean, you'd think that that's exactly what the guy is. I don't imagine that's what he, you know, really is like, but the performance from that half-wit guy, and not only is the performance great, but the characters are written so great, where it's just like, and you see the blonde guy kind of dominating him, not physically, I mean, come on. Oh my God, that's another aspect of the movie, is that I'll just simply say the cop guy, and what kind of sordid past does the cop guy have with the blonde guy. And it's like, I love it because they don't say, but you kind of, you know, you kind of assume. What's great is you can kind of assume whatever you want or whatever, and you know, a less perverted mind is going to come up with less perverted stuff than maybe a more perverted mind. I'm not going to say if my mind's less or more perverted. It's not very perverted compared to what they're teaching kids in kindergarten these days, but the dynamic, not only in the, you know, the dynamic of those two characters, the blonde one and the you know, the other guy is, I guess he's got like brown hair. And one thing I also want to say is, like, when the heavier set guy is, slow guy is in like the suit and that big puffy afro thing he's got, it's all he's missing is the goddamn Leatherface mask. And I was just like, wow, I just want him to stop with this movie and just put on a Leatherface mask and grab a chainsaw and just see what he looks like, because just with that big hair and that suit coat he had on, he's just like, wow, it kind of reminds me of Leatherface. But yeah, it can't be emphasized enough how, like, the dynamic between those two characters is great, and also just the performances, as I've already said, but particularly you really feel for the slow guy, you know, and throughout the course of the movie you really wonder if, you know, maybe the blonde guy is overstepping his boundaries or who knows what. But it's a you know, obviously kind of a subtle thing going on there, maybe not so subtle, but I think it's just really well written and really well casted, and like you really feel for the slow guy, and it's almost like, yeah, I think those two characters were fantastically well written and wonderfully cast, and especially the slow guy. You know, sometimes, as I said, I'm not crazy about the 2-inch or 3-inch depth of field on some of them close-ups or some shots and stuff, like having, so I'm not a fan of like blurred backgrounds and all this kind of stuff, but I more or less like the style, the visual style of this movie, and the quirky characters, quirky dialogue, and 2 hours really goes by relatively quick. One of my only criticisms is, perhaps it's maybe a little longer than it needs to be, maybe a little too much talking, but having seen it for the third time yesterday, I'm like, I suppose it's fine or whatever, and stuff, and so yeah. I just feel kind of like an idiot for just looking at a poster and going, what a bunch of crap. Of course, even though I like the movie, I'm still not crazy about the poster or whatever. But I will say that this movie it's another one of those movies that I defy you or dare you or whatever to try to predict what's going to happen moment to moment, because you're not necessarily going to be able to know or whatever. So I gotta tell you, I think it might be because I've just been streaming more stuff that I otherwise wouldn't have seen, But I gotta tell you, like, I don't know when it started, 2023 or 24, with In a Violent Nature and all these kind of movies that I've been, the last several years there have been actually kind of decent movies coming out, and it almost, or at least maybe that's what it's always been, and I just haven't been taking a chance on watching some of these movies because I would have had to pay to see it, or blind buy it, or whatever. But because I only I didn't really get into a lot of different streaming stuff until just recently, like 2022 or whatever, and so I guess just being able to take a chance on more because it's free or no additional cost to view a lot of this stuff, it's having me see more stuff than I ordinarily have been seeing or whatever. But it's kind of sad to think that, like, God, maybe there's always been a handful of good movies that have been coming out every year and I've been missing out on. But yeah, at least I've been able to experience these handfuls of these movies now. My star rating of this, I'm teeter-tottering, but I think at the end of the day, and not to, I don't know, yeah, I'll just simply say, like, for me, like, the end of this movie, I'll say, I can say that. The way this movie ends is just like, yeah, I think it would have been probably less than 4 stars, but with the whole movie and combining with the ending and the technical aspect of the epicness of the ending, we'll just go 4 out of 4 stars for what I pronounce as Bugonia. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it or not. It's how I pronounce it. The first time I watched it, I thought the first time I watched it, I think I did it in 2 or 3 parts, because when you've got a YouTube channel that you've got to cater to 900 subscribers, life can get busy and stuff, responding to comments, every couple comments a week, it can get busy, and then plus with what else I got going on. But so I think the first time I watched it in 3 different periods. I started it, okay, stopped, resumed, stopped, and then finished it or something. And then the second time I watched it, I showed Beth, saw it all the way through, and then third time I watched it, I showed Mom, saw it all the way through, and it was really great to see it with that 5.1, surround sound, and holy Hannah, So, and another thing I like about the movie is just like the music. I don't know if it's so much music as just like that'll just appear or whatever. The music's kind of cool. Not that there's any necessarily themes or anything to hum in your, like Star Wars or Indiana Jones themes, but it seems to be very common these days in film scores to be more just like abstract, musical, there it is. But in 5.1 surround, it's really like, wow, bam. It's really great and stuff. So I will say that I think I can say this without completely ruining your experience if you haven't seen the movie. The end credits is just very much like, my kind of style as well. It's just a little bit of music during the last scene of the movie, and then I think that might play over into the end credits, but then the song ends, and then the rest of the end credits is just like ambient nature, and then like a coming storm and some, light rain and stuff. And oh my God, I stood right in the middle of the living room while that was going on. Oh my God, the sound design for the end credits with just the ambient birds and outdoor nature stuff, and the thunder and the light pitter pattering rain, man. If you've got access to 5.1 or better, home surround sound, and you got to listen to the the end credits. and stand right in the middle there. It's just wow. You know, it's a shame. I really should probably get, honestly. Last night really made me think I need a newer 5.1 receiver that I can plug streaming into, you know, because all this, you know, a lot of this, well, up until recently, all the streaming I've been doing, I've been not being able to experience the 5.1, you know, surround audio. I just do it on TV speakers or whatever. But usually if I, and in the case of this as well, usually if I like a movie or whatever enough on streaming, I'll just buy the Blu-ray or whatever. But, you know, then I'm getting to the point where, gosh, you know, if you can get a, I know you physical media guys out there aren't going to like hearing this, but I'm to the point where it's like, if I can get a, you know, a newer receiver or whatever, maybe I don't got to buy as many Blu-rays. I mean, space is limited. Physical space in you know, in the abode is limited at the end of the day, and it's just like, if you can experience this, you know, the same thing streaming or whatever, I know, you know, you physical media people are gonna hate that. But anyway, I'll probably end the video. But yeah, it's actually kind of exciting what's been happening. It seemed to, maybe, I don't know if it started in 23, but definitely 2024 when I saw In a Violent Nature. It's like exciting to have, like, it seems like one after another of like actually decent movies that coming out that I'm seeing. And as I said like earlier, it's like kind of a shame if that's always been the case and I've just been missing out on these things. It's very possible that there's always been a handful of decent movies that come out every year and I just haven't been seeing them, which is kind of a tragedy, but that's okay. Guess that about does it for my review of Bugonia, if that's what it's called. If not, that's what I call it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video.